Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think we've got pretty much everyone who responded online. So thanks to everyone for your time this afternoon and for joining us for another Giants of Business webinar series. This afternoon's topic, obviously, business transformation and change management. We've got three great partners and successful businessmen in their own right who are great supporters of the Giants joining us to talk about, the impacts on very, very different businesses, but I'm sure we'll find some common ground in terms of impacts over the next 45 minutes or an hour. So what we'll do is we'll roll through. We've got some things that we wanted to ask the three gentlemen who I'll introduce in a moment, and then we'll have some times for questions at the end of the session. Obviously, a number of you have done these before. If I could ask that people that aren't speaking mute their microphones, that always makes life a little easier. And some people have sent some questions through already, which is terrific. If you do have some things that pop into your mind while we're speaking in the next 30 to 45 minutes, please email those through to Anthony Butler or myself, and we'll make sure that we cover those off before the end of the hour. But delighted to welcome this afternoon Damien Meredith, the Chief Operating Officer of Kia Motors Australia. Welcome, Damien.
Thanks, Sean.
Ross Miller, who's the General Manager of St.George Bank and the Chief Customer Engagement Officer of the Westpac Group. Ross, thank you for your time and lovely to see you. And Brock Gilmour, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales. Amongst other things in his portfolio is our landlord at Giants Stadium. So Brock, thanks again for your time and lovely to see you this afternoon. Ross Miller, the impacts to your workforce have been dramatic, and I know in some cases, in respects almost the opposite of Brock, you've had a situation where you've been actually looking for some casual staff and putting people on because of the changes to your business.
Yeah, because to a large extent, we've had to continue servicing all of our customers in a slightly different way to the way that we have previously. So, the big news for us really early in the piece was banking was deemed an essential service. So a bit like supermarkets and healthcare, we had to keep providing services all the way through. We saw early on, though, that the frequency of visits to our branches dropped dramatically. And we had a huge tilt to customers wanting to come in, not wanting to come in, but instead deal with us over the phones. We had call wait times of, a couple of hours at one point, very, very early on. But so we needed to react. And so we started shifting a lot of our branch staff into pop-up call centers that we developed. And then, as you just alluded to, Sean, we actually went out into market and hired about close to 1,000 additional people on temporary contracts to assist us predominantly with calls around immediate needs during the crisis. As you know, a lot of customers made the decision to access their superannuation. So we had to help them get it out of their super account once it was approved and into the funds. We had about 135,000 customers tell us they wanted to defer their home loan payments. That's across the Westpac Group, just not in St. George. So we had to get that set up for them. And I think the critical thing was we needed lots of customers that weren't used to dealing with us remotely, whether over the phone or digitally. We needed to upskill them quickly. So we've actually been incredibly busy. The challenge is, though, in light of that, it's in a very different economy to the one that we're expecting for the year. We're still seeing, inquiries on home loans are still relatively high. It's more of a refi business than a purchase business at the moment. No surprises there. So it's just learning how to do things in a very different way to we did before. So any sort of function we've been able to divert to digital and or virtual, that's what we've done.
Yeah. Thank you, Ross. And Damien, in a similar vein, I know that, Ross was saying there's been a high level of inquiry. In some cases, it's refinancing, but the phones have still been ringing. How have you found things in the automotive industry? No doubt you've had to shift some things around, but...
I think, Sean, we're right in between where Ross and Brock are. We've been fortunate. We haven't laid any staff off, but we haven't put any staff on. The market's down about 20% year to date, but that's mainly fleet and rental business. The private sector and retail sector's been relatively strong, and we've been fortunate that our offerings in regards to product have been able to fulfil those areas that are still going well. So as an organisation, we're going okay. Look, obviously that 6-week period in March and April was very, very tough, but the market's bounced back relatively well, and we've been able to hold our own and go reasonably well in that period since then. So it's business as usual in effect, and we're going pretty well, to be quite honest.
And now's maybe the time to touch on it, Brock, the issue that Damien raised in terms of, we've seen a rise in the concern of people. I think mental health is a real issue as we've all moved through COVID. I certainly know from a club perspective, it's we have the use of an in-house psychologist, which is predominantly being for the playing group, but he's now spent far more time obviously dealing with people on the business side for obvious reasons. The working from home seems to be one element where, as you say, that can alleviate some of the stresses, be it childcare, be it commute times, be it all those type of things. Is there anything else you've noticed or seen in terms of working with your teams in that regard?
Yeah, I think the problem that I have at the moment is I employ close to 50% of my staff at the Sydney Royal Easter Show, which is the largest ticket event in the Southern Hemisphere. And the problem, I can't give them any certainty, Sean. And it's hard, and they're really feeling down because, if a show doesn't proceed due to COVID-19, that's another 6 to 7 months not working for the RS of New South Wales. There's, I'd love the health authorities in a way. I know it's difficult for them to actually come out and say, listen, if we have no cases, no COVID transmissions in a period of 100 days, then the restrictions will be released or something like that. But yeah, the hardest thing for me at the moment, Sean, is the fact that there's just no certainty with the venues industry.
Yeah, and look, I think there's been some well-reported things about potentially a couple of states are maybe using border closures from a political point of view rather than a health point of view. That starts to complicate things as well. And I see Daniel Andrews was reported today that, they may extend the current restrictions in Victoria for another 12 months. So I think all those things contribute to that level of uncertainty with people. Damien, you touched on it before. Is there anything that you've put in place with the Kia team, with your dealer network as we've been through the last 6 months?
Yeah, look, we have, and similar to what you said, that they've got facility to see a psychologist if required, and I think that's really, really important that you give them some aspect outside the work environment that they can go and talk to. I think that's pretty important. A bit like Brock, I'm a bit of a dinosaur too, and all those things were sort of a no-go zone when I was younger. But I think it's really, really important that people, your staff, have that opportunity to express their concerns outside, the confines of management, etc. So we've been able to do that. I think the major issue is really the concern that the younger people have for their parents and grandparents. That seems to be a common thread that we've got with our people. So hopefully what we've put in place can reassure them and help them.
Yep.
And also I think it's really important that, I'm sure we are all doing it, that in regards to hygiene and following the correct procedures, which we all have now, is going to help dramatically.
Yeah, and I certainly, I've sensed as we've travelled around that, what's happened in Victoria was a lesson, and if someone wasn't taking this seriously at that point in time, they certainly are now.
Yeah.
Ross, there's been a lot of talk on the call about uncertainty and not knowing where we'll be in 3, 6, potentially 12 months. Within the bank, do you have a view? Do you have an overview on sort of any forecast and where things may be over that period? Is it still a moving target for you as you look across those periods?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a moving target, and I wouldn't want to be sort of. It's too early to firmly say what will happen with our economy. But this is all about the economy. The reality is, if we start with the domestic economy, COVID's having a massive impact on our ability to, just like you talk about, movement, supply chains, people's attitudes, people's appetite. We're seeing growth in some sectors. Massive growth in certain sectors, big drop off in anything that's got to do with hospitality, events we've talked about already. And that means that immediately on top of all of that, every business model needs to change to adapt to social distancing. So, previous, ideas around how you would make money have to change on the volume of people you can have. If you're in hospitality, the way that you move around and the costs associated of social distancing, like we have a massive cost that's associated with social distancing, everything from the way that we manage our branches to the safety equipment that we provide to people. So, you know, we've got concerns about the economy. A major loss of jobs is going to be the biggest concern to the Australian economy because it will impact our ability to actually, for people to be able to pay back debt, do all the things that they're doing. You know, it was interesting hearing from Damien before because, you know, we are seeing the impact of, you know, supply chains coming into you know, real pressure. Early on, it was China. So we wanted to make sure that effectively that didn't have an impact, but we're seeing problems with supply. You know, coming back to the Australian economy then, if unemployment stays at 10%, I think is what most people are predicting now, you know, that has a direct impact on the economy. You then start, well, what does that mean for the RBA? What does it mean for policymakers? And again, things are changing all of the time. So it's all about the shift in business. And of course, one of the segments we're most concerned about, as we would be, is that SME segment, because, you know, that's having the biggest impact at the moment. But there are, you know, there's a lot of Australians that are still in employment, like you talk about the essential industries. But I would suggest, you know, that's our biggest concerns around the economy. And then if you pull that back into, you know, what's happening more recently with Victoria, that puts further pressure on again because, you know, it's slowing things down even more.
Yeah. And are you seeing any sectors or any particular business stories? I mean, we've seen a number of small and medium enterprises, you know, pivot and do things differently. And we had people who were manufacturing alcohol and manufacturing sanitizers, that type of thing. Is there any sector that you can identify you've seen that's actually doing okay throughout this period?
Oh, anything that can do what it used to do fast online is a key business change, because it's just how fast you can change your business model to be able to adapt to what people need. Like, it's been fascinating watching Woolworths from a distance, I think, you know, as an example, those supermarket chains, because, you know, everyone has to buy stuff. And it's that combination of how fast that they can change their business model to be able to win market share. So, you know, there are certain sectors, there's, you know, a huge amount on online entertainment, those sorts of things, you know, depending on what market you're in, we're seeing some real positives. So, you know, like, I don't think I can tell anyone anything that they don't know. But if you can adapt quickly to be online and mobile, we're seeing some real performance in those businesses.
And Brock, is that something that you've contemplated? Obviously, you know, there's a knock-on effect with the show, and particularly into the rural and regional areas. You've got a number of stakeholders, and I think out of all of us, you're the guy that's got the most people on your board that I've ever seen. So, is it contemplated potentially doing things like that online and using that as a way to interact with your very sort of wide and diverse stakeholders?
Yeah, obviously, you know, trying to plan for the 2021 show is near impossible because the lay of the land's changing daily. But we're looking at all different ideas for the show. We could have like what do they call it? The African Lion Safari, where you actually visit the show in a car and you don't get out of the car. We're even looking at a virtual show. Have all our agriculture displays online, how to shear a sheep, etc. You know, the paddock to plate story. What we're trying to do is how do we commercialise that? You know, how do we break even if we change the format? Because the show is all about a real life experience. Sure, and that's what's made us successful, where you get to smell and feel the agriculture and all the animals and everything. But yeah, we're rethinking the way the show is going to look like. You know, in these times you've got to be fluid, flexible, and innovative, and we're no different to anyone else.
Yep. Damien, in the automotive industry, I know that the move to online and having a presence there in terms of not just people, if you like, you know, sort of shopping and comparing, but actually, you know, putting the rubber on the road and spending money, you've been moving towards that really rapidly. Does this pandemic and this point in time accelerate that from your perspective?
Well, it has, Sean. We didn't have that available up until a month ago, and since then we've sold 50 cars online. Now, that's unbelievable for me when you're used to the franchisee system of people inquiring through a dealer, and for that to happen so quickly is incredible. The other thing is too that the majority of those cars, the majority are full gross. So we do the business directly with the customer, then feed them out to the dealer network by postcode or PMO, prime market area, and it's worked incredibly well. I wish I'd have thought of it about 5 years ago, to be quite honest.
And that was my next question in terms of our interfaces with the dealer network, because obviously that's a relationship you build up over a long period of time.
Yeah, well, look, we've run into two problems where a person has purchased a car and then gone shopping after they've signed on for the online purchase. But look, we've been able to handle that, and the dealer network have been pretty understanding. So so far so good. It's worked quite well. A lot better than I thought it would.
That's great. You know, circling back to today's topic, business transformation, change management, because I did want to open it up and get some questions from the people that have joined us this afternoon. Ross, both Damien and Brock sort of touched on areas that they felt that changed maybe their management style in terms of whether it was Zoom meetings or people working from home. Is there a big call out for you in the last 6 months in something that maybe you didn't really believe in or didn't think would work, that you're now sitting there going, well, you know, it has and it will and it'll probably continue?
I'll spend less on discretionary spend, travel, visits, all those things that I will have ever seen in my working career. And I suppose it does sort of reinforce the quality you can still get by not going everywhere. Like, I do see our people are missing that connectivity. There is no doubt about it. But I think if we actually look at our cost base coming out of this and the way that we actually use our time, manage our resources, you know, we'll make long-term changes. Yep.
And so obviously, you know, that's one where you say there's a cost saving there and it's more efficient, but you touched on the connectivity piece with your people. Is there something else that you've done from a transformation or a management point of view that, you know, you're trading off one for the other?
Oh, I think that the key thing that we haven't done anything major yet, but it's that if you want to improve your digital and remote services and invest in that faster than you ever have before, you got to think about some of the things you're going to stop doing as well. Yep. So you can't do both, because at the moment we're in the fortunate position where we've been able to reutilize resources to do different things. The question is, as you come out, how do you actually sustain some of that to do things differently, given that customer behavior has dramatically changed during COVID? As you know, most, you know, if you look at our ATM transactions, you know, people are using less cash than ever before because of contactless payments. So you have to think about, if that behavior is going to continue, because it's likely going to in many instances, how do you reshape your organisation to actually have less cash moving through it, but making sure that the digital experience for customers is as good as it can be?
Yep. Damien, back to you. You know, you spoke about a couple of areas that you probably weren't a believer on 8 months ago. Is there anything else that's changing or has changed for you in terms of the way you operate the business or that you yourself operate?
Yeah, no, just reiterating what Ross said. I mean, I lived in a plane. I was, you know, I'd been in three states per week in effect, and it's not necessary. It's, you know, you can still do business and do it well, and technology is an amazing thing, and if you embrace it, you know, that cost base is going to change dramatically. I'm not quite sure that we'll all need big shiny showrooms and offices like we've got in Epping Road, Macquarie Park. I think it's going to change, and it'll change relatively quickly, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you know, it's certainly, again, from a Giants perspective, we haven't had people in the office since March. And I think in many respects we've become more efficient, and you sort of, you know, you work your way through it and get stuff done. Yeah. Brock, you know, just to round that question out, you touched on a couple of things. Is there anything else there that you say, you know, you weren't a believer on that this has changed for you?
Yeah, I think one thing that I have worked out is that the older generation are now embracing technology, which is a fantastic thing through this COVID. But I also learned a lot on an operational sense. You know, there's as you're aware, Sean, a lot of work went into from our team in setting up the GWS games in order to abide by, all the COVID restrictions that have been put in by government. And in my opinion, I think this will be the new level of safety and hygiene moving forward, regardless of whether, we resolve this issue. There'll be hand sanitisers all throughout the venues, warning to people with sickness, temperature testing, all that kind of stuff, because in order for an event to be successful, particularly families, they want to know that they're going to a really safe, well-organised event. So that's some of the things we'll be put in place in the future. I just don't think those measures will change. They won't be as drastic, but we certainly will not be abolishing, hygiene and all that kind of stuff.
Understood. And, it's pretty much par for the course wherever you go now, which is obviously a good and necessary thing. But, I think you're absolutely right. Look, I might throw it open for questions there as a call. I've got one here that's come in on the email for Brock, and you've covered off a couple of the things that Brian from Facilities First raised, Brock. But one of the ones he raised, which is a really interesting point, was around the fact that obviously you have a very deep rural connection, again, with stakeholders, exhibitors, all that type of thing. How has the rural sector reacting to this in terms of you've got areas of the country that are probably very minimally affected, but they're majorly affected by what's going on in capital cities?
Yeah, I catch up regularly with Agriculture Shows Australia. So all the agriculture shows, I'm actually part of the board. There's over 600 shows. The Minister David Littleproud, announced a $35 million grant to all the agriculture shows. We're still working through that process, and I'll be very frank, if that money's not forthcoming, this includes all the capital city shows and all the local rural shows around Australia, this industry could potentially fall over. And just with the capital city shows alone, would you believe we've got 1,000 years of experience in Australian business? So that money we need, and these little local shows that occur around Australia, that's the time of the year where all the community gets together and compares notes, and they've been through drought and bushfires. It's so healthy for their mental health, and if we're still working through that process. I'm sure the money will be forthcoming. It was announced about six weeks ago. There's still a few hoops we've got to jump through, but it's really affected that whole industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, they were the ones that came in to me. I might just throw it open to the call that if anyone's got a question or a comment that they wanted to raise with any of our panellists this afternoon.
Yeah, Sean, sorry, Anthony here. I just had a question for Damien, actually, and Damien, we're obviously chatting about it briefly before the call started, but you mentioned obviously there's been some shifts in terms of sort of the sales model, sort of, I guess, shifting towards things like online, and obviously as a result of the dealerships, obviously needing to close for a short period. So, I mean, is the dealership model for the automotive industry something you think might be impacted long term, and will we see some other sort of, I guess, customer experiences in the automotive industry moving forward?
Anthony, I think it will change. In regards to the dealers owning lots of land on major roads in Australia, that will take a little bit of time. The other thing that probably works in their favour is Australians still have a residual mentality. Something's worth something. So we can't jam a trade down a telephone line at this point in time. When someone works that out, well, it'll change dramatically. But I still think there's space for the traditional type setup. But what's going to happen is technology will move, not only with the adjuncts to business, but also the business itself. Once we start selling a lot of electric vehicles in Australia, I think the business model is going to change dramatically, because dealers won't be able to make a lot of money from servicing electrical vehicles. Just they don't need the servicing that normal engines require. So that's going to change dramatically, and with that, the technology and the modelling will have to change. So I hope that answers your question. It will change. Probably won't change straight away, but once the mix of vehicles changes, it'll change very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
Anthony, did you have anything else there from anyone that had emailed in or anyone that's on the call?
Sean, can I just jump in and make a couple of comments, ask a couple of questions? The first one is I just, from the position we sit in, I just want to thank the three guys for the insights they're giving us, and I know you'll wrap it up further later on, but it hasn't just been the insights and support you've given us over the course of the year that's been valuable to us. It's the friendship you have with the club, each of you individually. I think there's been a real spirit of collaboration and support. We've certainly felt that. I said at the start, even just small gestures like Damien makes a massive difference in providing some keys for us in a hub environment when other clubs are scrambling for those sorts of things. I know the opportunities, Brock, that we're as frustrated as anyone that the COVID numbers are low and we're not actually playing at Giants Stadium. We find it really difficult to actually absorb that because, clearly what we're able to do in playing home games with you is actually very successfully manage crowds and manage them in a corporate sense. And then I think about the partnership that we have with St.George, and just very, very grateful for the fact that, you came out of the block so quickly in the very first game that we came back and donated the St. George Skydeck to the cheer squad and allowed us to make some noise and do all those things. So I think I just want to acknowledge the collaboration and support you've given us. And, there's a lot more detail we could go there with, but, you're great partners and friends of the club. I had to take a quick call, but I've caught most of that. I'm not sure if this got covered, Sean, but I just had a question, probably, in particular, maybe start with Damien, but how have you seen the Australian government's response and the circumstances we're confronting in Australia compared to what some of your counterparts in other parts of the world are going through? How's it affecting their business?
That's a great question, Dave, a great question. Look, I think most countries have governments have supported what's required for their people. From my point of view, I'm astounded that, and in a positive way, astounded what a Liberal National Coalition government has done in regards to supporting the people of Australia. I think it's amazing. I didn't think it would go as deep as what they've done, but they moved quickly and they've moved deep, and it certainly helped our industry. There's no question about that. People can't travel, people can't go on holidays, but people can still buy cars. So we're pretty thankful for that. Yeah.
And so, Brock, from your point of view, when you think about the stadium development now, Chairman's been put in charge of, winning. Well, he's sort of in charge of every stadium other than yours, which is weird. But when you look at
where's this heading, Dave?
You can head anywhere you like. But when you look at the stadium management and stadium development, I mean, do you think the days of big venues like ANZ Stadium, does it bring that into question? Are we going to see more boutique environments? How would you, if you were setting our budgets next year, what are you thinking in terms of capacity at Giants Stadium for the year if we had to make a decision now?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I personally, I love the boutique stadiums. To be frank, there's nothing worse as a spectator when you go to ANZ. It doesn't matter what you're watching, and there's only 8,000 people in a 90,000 capacity stadium. It's like you're at the local football grounds. I think boutique stadiums are the way forward. I think it's a better experience for the punters. In regards to Giants and, Giant Stadium, as you're aware, we've got a master plan where we're trying to expand the capacity from, 23,500 to 30,000. I think personally, David, 30,000 is a good number for Giant Stadium.
And what would you be anticipating if you had to forecast? We're at 20% crowds in round one, or we're at 50, or how would you think through that?
Are you talking about post-COVID and how it'll affect attendance at games?
Well, yeah, I guess we're still trying to work out when post-COVID will be.
Yeah, well,
and that's the uncertainty everyone's living with, isn't it?
To give you an example, for our Royal Easter Show, next year we'd normally get, if there was no restrictions, we get about 800,000 people through the gate. The budget I've set for next year, that's assuming no restrictions, which is a big if. We believe that 650,000. So we believe it's going to have a big effect even when the restrictions are lifted. I think there's not a lot of discretionary income out there at the moment, Dave.
Yeah. And Ross, just one final one from me, and then I'll hand back to Sean. But you commented about the workspace of the towers in the CBD. How are you currently dealing with your landlords or developers of facilities that you're occupying around Australia? Is it, I guess they're starting to feel the stress if people are after rent relief and what their future valuations look like. How does that all play out?
Yeah, well, we're doing it at two levels. We're doing it supporting our customers that are challenged, particularly our business customers. From our retail business point of view and from our occupancy, we've had to meet the occupancy standards if you look at a building like this, but we've reutilised space where we've had to because we've got the pop-up call centres as well. So it's been about how we utilise space in a different way. At this point in time, we haven't made any footprint changes. So it's just it's a watch this space. It's interesting. I must admit, just as a person that reads the press, I was interested in sort of, some of the correspondence between the Westpac group the Centre group last week and some of their tenants in shopping centres where they're, it's getting to a head around those rent pieces. I think we'll see more of that. At a consumer level, of course, from a landlord point of view, we're working closely with a lot of our customers who are investors and have had to sort of reduce or change rents for consumers as well, just in residential properties as well. So I think, it will continue to be a major focus over the coming months as the economy plays out.
Yeah. No, thanks, guys. Great to see you all too.
Good to see
Thanks,
you.
Dave.
Sean, back to you, mate.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. I think that's a pretty good note to possibly wrap it up on. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's joined us this afternoon. In particular, Damien, thank you. Lovely to see you, and thanks for your time again this afternoon. Ross, to you. Really appreciate your insights and joining us, and Brock, all the best moving forward. I mean, there's some particular challenges in some of the sectors that you deal in, but we hope it all goes well for you. So, thanks everyone. We'll be in touch in the near future with our the next Giants of Business webinar series. But to everyone, please stay safe and well. And again, thanks for your time. Have a good evening.